Hello, today we're going to be talking about organic chemistry. Um, Organic compounds are going to be compounds that contain carbon. With carbon comes hydrogen and usually oxygen. Now, organic compounds are going to be those 6 elements that are found in 97% of all organisms. So we also have N, S, and P to complement the N chomps. But when we talk about something organic, it has to have carbon. With that comes hydrogen and usually oxygen. So like CH4 is methane. That is an example of a organic molecule. H2O is not. Okay, so water is not. So put a big X. That is not an organic compound. Okay. Now, just to kind of review a little bit about carbon. Carbon can form 4 covalent bonds. So the one I talked about before with the methane is what it would look like, CH4. And again, it has carbon with hydrogen, so it is going to be organic. There are 4 main types of organic compounds that we'll be talking about. There are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. There's over 2 million different types of organic compounds, just so you're aware. And here's some variety of different examples. Today, we're going to be focusing in on carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates are going to contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and we're going to see a 2-to-1 ratio between the hydrogen and the oxygen. So the simplest carbohydrate is C6H12O6. That's glucose. That is the simplest carbohydrate. That is a monosaccharide. Now, if you remember from our little basic terms, when you join two things together, you do need to remove water. So we are, in fact, if we join 2 of these, we would have to take out an H2O in order to make it a complement. So there's only a 2-to-1 ratio between the hydrogen and the oxygen. Okay? We eat carbohydrates, and our body needs carbohydrates because it is a big source of energy. If you notice, before big sporting events, you always have a pasta party. Okay? It also is going to function in biological construction inside of our body and our cells. Now, when we talk about carbohydrates, we have glucose, fructose, sucrose, lactose. They all tend to end in ose. So you can think of ose meaning sugar. This is what a structural diagram would look like. We are actually going to make carbohydrates in the lab when we're using our organic molecule sets. Okay, so we'll be making glucose, and then we'll actually be making a disaccharide to join those two so you can see the dehydration reaction. So the first thing we're going to talk about are monosaccharides. Then we'll talk about disaccharides and the polysaccharides. Monosaccharides refers to one sugar. Okay, so it is a simple carbohydrate. It's a single sugar. Now, the chemical formula is going to be C6H12O6, and that is for glucose. Okay. We also have fructose, which is a 6-carbon sugar, which is hexose. We also have ribose, deoxyribose, which is our 5-carbon sugars, which are called pentoses. Those typically are the most common. Okay. We're going to be talking about glucose in the ring form, and we will be making that in the lab. Now, one thing I want to point out is at every corner there is a carbon, except here where you have your oxygen. Okay, this is the ring form, and we'll be making this in the lab. Now, monosaccharides, glucose, that is the simplest of everything. Okay, now we're now going to talk about disaccharides. Disaccharides are 2 sugars. So 2 monosaccharides bonded together. So the molecular formula is C12H22O11. So if we take 2 glucoses, and just give me a second to write the formula. I'm trying to be quick, but I don't want it to be so you can't read it. So you have glucose plus glucose. Okay, now when you join them, you have to do something. You have to remove water. So I should put a plus here. You have to remove an H2O. So when you do that, you are going to get the C12H22O11. Again, a 2-to-1 ratio between hydrogen and oxygen. Now, we do have sucrose, lactose, and maltose. Now, you have to know what each one is made up of. Each of them contains at least one glucose. Sucrose is made up of glucose plus fructose. Lactose is made up of glucose plus galactose, and I'm sorry it has been cut off here, but we do have maltose equals glucose plus glucose. Okay, so you are going to have to memorize that. Sucrose is glucose and fructose, lactose is glucose and galactose, and maltose is glucose and glucose. And this is just showing you we're actually making sucrose, so we're adding glucose plus fructose minusing the water to give you sucrose. Okay, and this is just a little diagram that your book has that shows you sweetness of the different types of sugar. Okay, now polysaccharides, excuse me, is when we have many glucose molecules bonded together. Okay, they are very complex carbohydrates, and we have two types. We have starch and cellulose. Now, there are two main types of glucose. There is an alpha glucose, okay, and there is a beta glucose. And I'm sorry, my handwriting is awful because I'm using my finger. And then there is a beta glucose. Okay. Now, the two forms of starch and cellulose either are going to contain alpha or beta glucose. So starch, okay, is made up of repeating alpha glucoses, where the cellulose is made up of repeating beta glucoses. We can't break down the beta bonds between the two beta glucoses, so we cannot digest the beta glucose, so we can't digest the cellulose. Where we can break down the bonds between alpha glucose, so we can break down the starch. And this is just showing you how they branch out, and again, it's just made up of bonded glucoses. Okay, we have starch, we have glycogen, which is animal starch, and then we have cellulose. We have two other things to talk about. We have chitin, which is found in the exoskeleton of arthropods. It is a sugar that contains nitrogen, and that is what you crunch or you hear crunch when you squash a bug. Glycogen, like I said, is animal starch, and that is found in human liver and muscles, and that's how our body stores carbohydrates. Okay, we will talk about lipids tomorrow. If you have any questions, please see me tomorrow. Thank you.